Final update. My wife called me to tell me she was going to sleep with a celebrity on a trip. But she came back to find the house empty and no kids. Part 4. In the courtroom, while she testified, he lowered his head to avoid my eyes. Jenny started to squirm when my lawyer questioned her about calling Jack and telling him that Amy left with the soap star. Obviously nervous now, she stuck to the story, saying it didn't happen. When Jenny sat down, both Amy and her lawyer had smug looks on their faces as the lawyer announced they had no further evidence. Amy's lawyer got up and started to argue that they wanted sanctions for our false claims. The judge began to admonish my lawyer for not proving the claims we put forth. With a smile on her face, Mrs. Sampson stood up. "Excuse me, Judge. We have rebuttal evidence." Amy's lawyer snapped, "I object. We haven't been notified of rebuttal evidence. We have no duty to disclose rebuttal evidence. If their witnesses told the truth, there would be no need for rebuttal evidence." The judge smiled and told Mrs. Sampson to proceed. Mrs. Sampson called her investigator to the stand. "Judge, before we proceed, we are conceding that Mrs. Butler did not have intimacy with Joshua Marrow." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but Mrs. Sampson gave me a look to shut up and wait. The lawyer put her investigator on the stand, who testified that Joshua Marrow was in Europe the week of Amy's conference. Amy's lawyer jumped up with this admission that my client didn't commit adultery. "We are demanding that we stop this farce and have the court issue sanctions on Mr. Becker." Mrs. Sampson, with a big grin on her face, said, "No, we are not saying she didn't commit adultery, we are just saying it was not with Joshua Marrow." Jenny was recalled to the stand. My lawyer asked her again if she was with Amy at the conference and if they had met who they thought was Joshua Marrow. She again denied it. Jenny was asked if she had made a call to her husband, telling him that Amy left with a man who was not her husband. Even after being reminded she was under oath, Jenny denied she made the call. I turned to look at her husband, who mouthed, "I'm sorry." I mouthed back, "No, you will be." My lawyer hit play on the recording of Jenny's call. Amy's lawyer jumped up, objecting to the recording. "Judge, my client was an invited guest in the witness's home and allowed to listen in on the call." The judge told the lawyer to sit down and ask Jenny if that was, in fact, her voice. She had no choice but to admit that it was. I was starting to feel vindicated when there was finally evidence that I was telling the truth. Amy was recalled to the stand. Amy again denied that when she came home from her trip, she had intimacy with another man. She let out a loud gasp when the video of her graphic description of her intimacy with Joshua Marrow was played. Amy was in tears when the selfies and the signed publicity picture were put into evidence. As Amy walked from the witness stand, the judge interrupted. "Counsel, I'm confused. You said that Mrs. Butler did not have intimacy with Joshua Marrow, but you've just presented evidence that she did." Mrs. Sampson recalled her investigator. "Judge, our evidence proves that Mrs. Butler committed adultery, but just not with who she thought." The investigator put up surveillance photos from the club. Several pictures showed Amy and the man she left the club with. As indicated in the photos, this was not Joshua Marrow. He is a lookalike who likes to pick up married women. He is a known man who had been diagnosed with several STDs. I just had to look over at Amy at that point. The look of shock on her face was priceless. After a short recess, the judge returned to the bench. He gave a long speech about honesty and faithfulness. The judge ruled that Amy had committed adultery as spelled out in the prenup. He ruled in my favor, upholding the prenup. The judge lectured Amy that even if there hadn't been a prenup, he would have awarded me custody of the kids. On the record, he found Amy to be an unfit mother for her extensive attempts at deception. With tears in her eyes, Amy turned from the counsel table to leave, but the judge bellowed from the bench, "Mrs. Butler, stay put. We're not done yet." The judge summoned Jenny to the bench to join Amy. "You both raised your right hand and swore to tell the truth in my courtroom. That oath is sacred in this building." He looked right at Jenny. "I don't care if you have some misguided belief that you were helping your friend, lying is lying in this courtroom. If this had been a criminal case, you both would be in jail right now. I'm finding that you both committed perjury, and I'm holding you both in contempt of court." The judge fined them both the maximum penalty of $5,000. Amy's bad day got worse when she walked out of the courthouse to a local news team putting a camera in her face. I found out later that my lawyer tipped them off. "Mrs. Butler, do you have a comment on throwing away your family for a one-night stand with a fake TV star?" The reporter's question was the straw that broke Amy's back. Amy let out a blood-curdling scream and then attacked the reporter. It was a blur of hands and feet as Amy struck at the reporter. Amy had her on the ground, pulling her by the hair when a deputy deployed his taser. The cameraman caught the entire episode on video, and Amy was on all the national news outlets that night. Sadly, Amy didn't get to see her finest moment. She was locked up in the county jail, where she would stay for the next 6 months. No, I didn't have a beautiful blonde lined up to take Amy's place. I was too busy raising 2 kids as a now single parent. And no, I didn't reunite with Amy when she got out of jail, even though she tried. My mother felt sorry for her and asked me to give her another chance. She had lost her career and became the subject of ridicule throughout the town. After 3 months of Amy calling and texting me, I agreed to meet with her at her mom's home. Silently, I sat and listened to Amy tell me how much she loved and missed me. She missed being part of our family. As a result of her arrest and conviction of assault, she was only allowed limited supervised visits with the kids. Amy said she was so sorry for lying about her hookup, as she called it, and was so embarrassed that it turned out she was conned by a fake. She finished by pleading with me to take her back, saying she would be the best wife ever. I stood up and took a deep breath. "Amy, that was an impassioned speech. I believe you mean every word. You apologized for lying. You said you missed our family. You said you love me. I believe you, I really do. But it is what you didn't say that is most telling. You've never said you were sorry or even shown any regret for breaking our wedding vows. I think you are sorry that it turned out you didn't have your dream guy. I still don't believe you are sorry that you were cheating on me or even that it was cheating. The answer to your question is no, and hell no, I will not take you back now or ever. I want you to stop contacting me, period. If you don't, I will renew the restraining order I was granted when you were arrested. Amy stood up crying. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I enjoyed it, is that what you wanted to hear? Amy, we're done. Go live your life. It will not be with me. I turned and walked out the door, with Amy screaming at me and her mom holding her back.